Hey, good evening. Another Wednesday night. We may not be having supper together like we would prefer, but we can still enjoy some Bible study together. I hope you've been doing well and keeping safe and connecting as best you can. We're going to tonight just cover some more of the material that we talked about this past Sunday, where we were on week 23 of the story. And in the sermon, I was really only able to touch on one little part of that chapter of the story. So tonight I'd like us to just kind of look over a few of the other things that happened during that phase. It's roughly cut out into like year 1, year 2, year 3, not slavishly, but just thinking about the beginning of Jesus' ministry. And then next week we'll talk about sort of his popularity phase, when everything was going right and everybody wanted to be near him. And then the last phase, which is a little more somber, and during his journey to Jerusalem and the completion of his mission. So again, this is just kind of the continuation of chapter 23 of the story and some of the things that he was about. Once he had gone through his time of prayer and fasting, had endured his temptation, he was really ready to get started. And of course, he kicked that off with asking John the Baptist to baptize him, not because he needed to be forgiven or washed of anything, but to set an example, because that was something that he wanted to do and that was necessary for his journey. And we believe that he wanted us to follow in that and do the same. And so immediately he's preaching the coming of God's kingdom, but he's also gathering his team. And it's just a really neat thing. You've probably heard these stories a million times. I know I've heard them and told them a million times. But it's always so enjoyable to look back over and just try to imagine being in a perfectly normal day, doing your everyday things the same way you'd done them for years. And then Jesus breaks into your normality and says, you got something completely different that you need to be doing. Now, here's something. I do want you to go back and read those sometime later. Maybe you can read them while I'm talking. But I'm almost certain. I don't know. It's just a hunch I have. I think that these weren't the only people that Jesus invited to be his disciples. I think there were more, and these were the only ones that anybody wrote down because they stuck around. I don't know, but it just seems like there had to be some other ones who were just like, what? I've got a meeting this afternoon. Oh, I'll miss dinner. My dad will be disappointed. I mean, James and John left their dad in the boat. It's one thing to, say, take this job and shove it and walk off. But this was the family business. They were sitting there fishing with their dad, and they're like, all right, Dad, have a good day. I hope it's not a busy one. And walked off. I mean, just the enormity of dropping everything and following Jesus. Just think what kind of impact his person must have had. And clearly, he picked these. We see, he says to Philip, I think, I should have written this down. I saw you ahead of time. I knew what was going on. And he knew these guys. He already had scouted them out, if you will. He knew them. He understood them. He knew who he was talking to. And he saw their potential. Some of them were pretty rough, but he saw their potential. And just like they became his disciples, we become his disciples. Somewhere along the line, each one of us had Jesus intrude into our everyday normality. And we had to decide, are we going to do something different now? And again, he said, you're a fisherman, you're just going to fish for people now. It doesn't mean everything's dramatically different. Sometimes we use our skills in a different way. Some people, like the tax collector, had to drop everything and do something completely different. That's true too. But somewhere along the line, he invited us along. And we had to decide, do I hold on to what I'm used to, or do I drop it and follow Jesus? And he gave them a new focus, a new thing to be about, a new reason for their lives. Boy, I don't know about you, but I respond to purpose. I'm the guy nobody wants in their meeting because I cannot do anything unless I know what we're trying to accomplish. We got to have a vision for this group, or I don't even know what we're doing here. And so I can be a little bit of a gadfly. I know this is a big surprise to some of you. But you have to know what you're trying to accomplish, or you never know if you're getting anywhere. And Jesus gives us that. He says, okay, I'm going to give you a new goal, something to shoot for that you can focus your life on. And he also, maybe not with all of them, although he did seem to like nicknames, he meets Peter and he's like, you're not Peter anymore. I got a new name for you. And of course, in our society, we give nicknames freely, often to make fun of people because of something dumb they did. But in the Hebrew culture, names meant so much. It meant much about who you were, who your parents hoped you would be, how they felt, how they were connected to God at the time. And so Jesus says, I'm going to call you Rock. Peter might, I don't know, I wasn't there. He might have been a little insulted at the time because it could have come across. If you walked up to somebody and said, you know what you make me think of? A rock. That might be, it could come across negatively. But we know, because we know the rest of the story, what Jesus saw in Peter. And he was indeed a rock when the time came. And then we see Jesus visiting with Nicodemus. What a great gift that this was captured for us in the Gospel of John. And here, this is one of the best examples. It happens throughout the Gospels. This is a spectacular example of how Jesus would be talking on this level and people listening were thinking on this level. It's a little like the upper story and the lower story, but Jesus is talking about heavenly things and God's work, and the people that heard him always heard it in terms of everyday normality in their life. And so Jesus is saying, you must be born again. And Nicodemus, a wise, learned man, all he can do, what? He climbed back into your mother's womb. They just couldn't connect. And fortunately, this is the good part of Nicodemus's difficulty grasping what was going on, was that Jesus gave us one of the clearest statements of the gospel that we get anywhere in the Bible. And that's why John 3:16 has been such a treasure in the church for so many years. And we don't have recorded if Nicodemus finally said, oh, okay, I get it now. We don't know. But at least Jesus left that record for us so that we can know that he's God's one and only Son, and that if we believe in him, we shall not perish and have everlasting life. Also, if you look through this phase, this early phase in Jesus' ministry, you'll notice that he goes where good Jews don't go, and he hangs out with people that good Jews don't hang out with. Unapologetically, of course, as he did with everything else. But he crosses into Samaria, which, a good Jewish person would literally go days out of their way to circle around the border of Samaria, because you just didn't go near those people. They were looked down on, avoided at all costs. And he's just like, we're going straight through. And then in Samaria, he meets a woman. Men didn't talk to women, not good, upstanding men for sure. And nobody in that town would hang out with this particular woman. What does Jesus do? He walks right up to her and starts a conversation that led to her becoming connected to the source of living water and then spreading the gospel to her whole town. It's a great story, worth reading over and over. But all of that happened because Jesus didn't adhere to the social and cultural boundaries. And that's definitely a challenge for us, to think about the lines we think we shouldn't cross. I know in Baptist history we've been a little weird about going to places of ill repute and hanging around people of ill repute. And yet, here's Jesus doing exactly that. Kind of odd, isn't it? So maybe we need to rethink some of that. We don't want to get involved in things that will hurt our witness, but don't we want to connect with people who need Jesus? Jesus certainly thought so. Just saying, need to think about it. Then later, it's the exact same thing. Matthew's like, hey, I've got all these buddies that, they don't come to church. Church people don't like them. And Jesus is like, have them over for dinner. Let's do this. And there he is, hanging out with tax collectors and sinners, one of my favorite phrases in the Bible. And everybody who's a good, holy churchgoer is like, oh my. Oh, I think I'm going to have the vapors. I mean, they were just going crazy, thinking, how can a decent person hang out with those folks? And here's Jesus saying, who needs a doctor, the sick people or the well people? Come on now. And again, we're supposed to be following his lead, not the Pharisees' lead. Something we got to talk about. In fact, I'm not trying to give church a hard time, or us, or you. I'm just following where the scriptures go here. But notice he goes into Capernaum, and he visits the synagogue, and that's where he has trouble with the evil spirits. Did you notice that? Did you catch that? Everything's going fine until he goes into church. But there among the members of the synagogue was a person with an impure spirit. Sometimes we think those only happen out there, but oh yes, they can certainly come into a church. And of course, this spirit is saying, I know who you are, the Son of God, and Jesus silences him and kicks him out. I just think it's really ironic that he gets the kickback, the demonic presence, not out with the sinners, but in the church. Just putting it out there. But the last part of this chapter is what really was kind of weighing on me and jumping out at me. And that's, after sundown. And I'm not 100% sure what the significance of that was. It might have had something to do with Sabbath rules. But after sundown, the people, not Jesus' disciples, not the religious folks, not the God-fearers, the people brought everyone who was sick or demon-possessed to Jesus. Wouldn't it be something if people in the community looked around and said, that person is so lost and wishing they knew love and wishing they had a purpose. I'm going to make sure that person gets to Jesus. Wouldn't that be amazing? The whole town gathered at the door. The whole town. I'm picturing that right now. I mean, we're lucky if we see a car drive by right now because it's pretty quiet in Urbanna. Just try to picture the whole town gathered outside the door because what's inside is something they know they need. Truth is, these days, maybe we've misrepresented Jesus. I don't know what's gone wrong. But people don't look at the church and think, oh, there's something in there I need. But when people recognize the power of Jesus, they're coming and banging at the door. It got to where, this is a later, but it's the same place in Capernaum again. Later on, the crowd is so thick, these guys tear through the roof to lower down somebody just to get to Jesus. When was the last time we saw anybody that desperate to get someone to Jesus? And by all accounts, these weren't even the inner circle. We don't even know if they were believers. But they saw somebody in need and they knew Jesus was the answer. I'm not sure these days that even the dedicated Christians who come to church every week work that hard to connect a person to Jesus. I can't remember digging through any roofs. Maybe there's something here that we're supposed to pick up on. Maybe there's a lesson here for us to consider about how we represent ourselves, how we connect to those outside of the faith, not necessarily just outside of the church, just outside of faith, outside of belief, and how we represent the power of Jesus. Because I think when people really know what he can do in their lives, they're going to bust down the door, aren't they? Maybe we can work a little harder to make sure people know what Jesus has done in our lives and what he can do in theirs. Thanks for joining me tonight. We'll see you soon. Thanks.